Right.
So good morning. Can you hear me?
Morning, sir.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Morning, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Please mute your systems.
Yes.
So in the last class, we talked about the theories, started talking about ethical theories. And in this class, we will continue with that. And is there, before getting into the class, is there any feedback that you want to give regarding the online courses, I mean, online mode of delivery? Is there anything that we can do to, improve whatever we are delivering, both from your side as well as from my side? I got one suggestion from a student who wanted to make all the articles, right now the articles or reading materials for this course is made available only on a weekly basis, right? So one student requested me to make all the things available at one go so that they can take the printout, which I will do today. So today, once the class gets over, I'll make all the articles available, so that you can take print out and keep it with you at one go. Secondly, there are no textbooks for this course, but all the reading materials along with, the PPTs that I share should be sufficient or more than sufficient to prepare for any exams or assessments. So do not worry about it. The reading materials cover more than what is required. So even if you want to read extra, there is enough need for it in the reading material. And other than that, and also please keep in mind this is a new experiment for not only us but for everybody. And hence we may evolve. Even Harvard, for example, is experimenting with the new things, and Harvard Business School is experimenting with new things and changing their approach to make it better. So we also need to follow that. Thankfully, Harvard has done it, and there are enough tips available for faculty members like me to ensure the quality of delivery. Still, we may have to make some modifications in the way we deliver. For example, how do we measure class participation, and maybe we may have to change some of the assessment or evaluation methods, right? And also there are also additional advantages available to us due to this online mode. For example, I can give breakout groups, right, which would facilitate better discussion among yourself for the case. So, and I also encourage you to, form groups and discuss it among yourself for any case that we are going to discuss, before coming to the class. So these changes might happen as we proceed. So please adjust with that. We are living in uncertain times. We are living in an interesting times. In fact, this is an opportunity. Hopefully, we recover from it successfully. But this is an opportunity for us to learn many things. This is a once-in-a-century opportunity, right? The last major global epidemic happened in 1918, which was called Spanish flu. So that is when, the entire world went for a shutdown. So after this, after 102 years, we are getting into this opportunity. So in a way we are living in interesting times, but this also requires some adjustments, right? Hopefully we do come out of it with the limited damage, but we may have to make some adjustments. So this is also part of it. So bear with me in case if I make any modification in the assessment criteria. As of now, it remains the same. If required, based on how it proceeds, I may make modifications in the assessment criteria. So that is something that you need to bear with. Okay. So now let's, is there anything that you want to ask me? Feel free to type it in the chat window or unmute yourself and interfere and talk as well. But my only request is when you talk, switch on the video. Is there anything that you want to clarify or ask? I'll give you 2 minutes or probably 1 minute. So I do have 2 screens. My laptop is also kept parallelly because my laptop has it's a touchscreen laptop, so I can use it as a board, whiteboard. So I may look into that sometime. So it may don't think that I'm not looking at the screen. I'll be looking at another screen. Okay, so that is so don't think that the professor is looking somewhere and teaching us. No, it is not the case. I'll be looking at the laptop and use the whiteboard. Okay, if you don't have any queries, then let's proceed. So what did we discuss in the last class? Briefly.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
We discussed about businesses and moral and ethics and how basically ethics are formed. So they are formed via religious texts. So
okay. Anybody else?
Hi, sir. Good morning.
Yeah.
So in the last class, we discussed about what is a business and talking about how the communist economic model will not sustain. Then we talk about what is the different contribution of business, and from that, what are the different stakeholders, primary and secondary stakeholders. Then we moved on to discussing what moral standards and ethical standards, and finally ended with the discussion about ethical theories, both the theological and the ontological theories.
Right. So thank you. So we talked about the ethical theories, right? And we identified 2 categories of ethical theories, teleological theory and deontological theory. Remember, we are not going to get into the details of these ethical theories. These ethical theories we are touching upon because they lay the foundation for it. But otherwise, you have already studied them in business ethics and law course. So this objective is to just recollect those things. So we are not going to dwell deep into the ethical theories, right? We will limit the discussion on it as much as possible so that we can get into the main topic. Okay, so we will continue with the ethical theory. Okay, so we talked about universalism and we try to identify what is universalism, and we also see that universalism is not clear in certain situations, and in fact it might help to justify an unethical act as an ethical act. So we have seen the example of the white people in America trying to justify slavery by stating that if I were a black person, I would accept myself being treated as a slave. So that's because they are not black people, and hence they can talk about it with conviction. So that's a problem with universalism. And the next one is theory of rights. What is theory of right? I'm sure you studied about it in business ethics. What is theory of right? You can type it. Have you heard about theory of rights? Okay. So theory of rights is basically says that it's again part of the deontological theory category where the means are important. So theory of rights states that basically your actions should not violate the rights of the individuals. Every individual has some rights, and your action should not violate it, regardless of the end or the consequence of it, or the end benefit of it. So that is as simple as that. You do whatever you want, but do not violate the rights of others. So that is the theory of rights. Everybody has certain rights. Actions should respect the rights. The means are important than the ends. Rights cannot be overridden by the utility. That's the most important part, and that's why it's categorized as part of deontological theories. Now, what do you think can be the problem here?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead, Vaibhav.
One of the problems is that sometimes, based on the geopolitical scenario, some rights might not be stated, and
Okay.
hence legally they can the principle of rights can be violated, because if something is not stated, it cannot be held. So
Okay.
a bigger theory is the harms principle, and that goes with respect to the
Okay,
social
I get the
contract.
point. I think you are. I appreciate that, Vaibhav, but I think you are coming from the legal perspective. Remember, right now we are living. We are talking about the fundamentals of ethics, and ethics is much older than the laws. The rule of law as a concept is very recent. Okay, so we are not just talking about the legal rights, but we are talking about the basic rights of the human. But you what you say is correct to the extent that what are those basic human rights? That itself is not very clear, right? And who would fulfill them? There are something called positive rights and negative rights. I have the right not to be harmed by anybody. As long as I'm not harming anybody, I should not be harmed by anybody. That is my right. Right? So that is easy to implement. But what about, I have the right for potable water. I have the right for food. Now, who would fulfill this right? That is a big question. Who would fulfill the rights? I want a, decent shelter to sustain my life. I want food to sustain my life. Who will provide these things? Yeah, I would work for it. But who would ensure that when I work, these things are given to me? Is it the state? Is it the society? That is not clear, right? So, because this, why should if it is the state, if you say the government has the responsibility, then it goes to the next question. If you go to a country like Somalia, right? Somalia practically doesn't have Somalia is split into 3 regions for practical purposes. Puntland and Somaliland have some government, but the southern part of Somalia, doesn't have any government worth the name. Now, who will fulfill the responsibility? Who will fulfill the fundamental rights of the people living over there? There is no government at all, right? Same is the case with, say, Libya, right? Nobody knows who is the government. There is something called United Nations recognized government, but whose authority is restricted only to Tripoli and the surrounding regions. And then there is somebody called General Haftar, who is waging a war against them, and they claim that Haftar claims that he is the legitimate government of Libya, but he controls, the eastern and southern parts of Libya. So who is the government? Right? Who is the government? Who has the responsibility to fulfill the basic rights of the human beings living there? That's not clear. So if General Haftar is focusing on the war rather than trying to protect the people here, can we say he's unethical? Or if you say take the, he would say that, you know, I can provide all these things only if I defeat the evil government based in Tripoli. So all these things would come into picture, thereby making even simple, you know, this is at a very broader level, even if at an individual level. I'm sure all of you would agree that everybody has the right to marry a person of your choice. Now, if that is the case, if you tomorrow say that you want to marry Anushka Sharma, right? Is it ethical or unethical? If you say I want to marry Anushka Sharma, is it? I mean, regardless of whether you are male or female, it doesn't matter nowadays, right? Now, you have the right to marry the person of your choice, but in that process, you may end up violating the rights of another person. Okay. Even if, let's say, Anushka Sharma is okay with you, you may end up violating the rights of Virat Kohli. So that's the problem, you know. Your right cannot be fulfilled without violating the rights of another person. So in such case, what do we do? So that is the problem with principle of rights. Yeah, conflict among rights and who and what defines positive rights. That's what we say. And then comes ethics of care. Ethics of care is kind of a separate thing, right? You know, you have deontological theory, teleological theory, and virtue ethics. Ethics of care is for some specialized situations. I'll explain it with a simple example. Let us assume that you are walking along a beach. You are going for a morning walk, and one side is your father. Kavya, what is your question? Please send to everyone. What do you want to be?
So just now I heard you repeating some answer. I thought somebody sent you a private chat.
Pardon? Somebody sent a private chat.
Private chat answer. So I told that to send it to everyone. Any answer.
Okay, so let's assume you are walking on the beach, morning walk, and along with your father and a renowned cardiologist. Okay, and the cardiologist is not only a great doctor, but also a great human. He has conducted, you know, hundreds of heart surgeries without charging a single paisa if the patient is from a poor family. And so he is a very noble person and helping many people. And so three of you are walking along the beach, and suddenly, let's say a big tsunami comes, and and sweeps all the three of you away. It's taking you inside the sea. And with one hand, somehow you are able to get hold of a pole, say an electric pole or some pole. You are able to get hold of it, and with the other hand, you can save one person. Whom will you save? Your father? I'm sorry, there's a power cut. I hope you are able to see me. Whom will you save? Your father or the cardiologist? And why? You can type your answer. I don't see much participation today.
Sir, I couldn't hear the complete question in the first part of your question. Just flickered.
Okay. The question is, I repeat, you are walking along the beach. One side is a renowned cardiologist. The other side is your father. And suddenly a tsunami comes and sweeps all the three of you away. And you are able to get hold of a pole, a very strong pole, with one hand. With the another hand, you can save one person. Whom will you save is the question. Will you save your father or the cardiologist? If you apply the in ethical theories, the answer would be, I mean, deontological or teleological theory, the answer would be you got to save the cardiologist, right? If you are, deontological theories or teleological theory is very clear. End result is important. So the end result is if you save save the cardiologist, he can save thousands of other lives in the future. If you apply deontological theory, it basically says that universalism, for example, if you put somebody else in your shoes, right, you would prefer that person to save the cardiologist because you are not going, because the rest of the world is not going to benefit from saving the father. But still, if you save your father, right, nobody is going to tell you that you are unethical. Why? Even if if you don't save, if you save the father and not the cardiologist, nobody would say you are unethical. You are perfectly ethical because you have, that is where ethics of care comes into picture. Obligation, you have the obligation to exercise special care towards those particular persons whom we have valuable close relationship, right? You would have seen I haven't watched the second series Breath, but in Amazon, in the first one Breath, where Madhavan was acting, you would have seen that, some of you or many of you, right? So what Madhavan does, the father character, what he does is ethical from his perspective. He's killing people, but it is ethical. He doesn't have the guilt feeling because when you are violating it, you would have a guilt feeling. He doesn't have it because for him, he has the obligation to exercise special care towards his son, whose life he has to save. So he can do anything, for the sake of it. So he ends up killing people, right? To get the, move the blood donor list, or move his son in the waiting list for the people who accept the donation, organ donations, right? So that is what works in his mind, ethics of care. Okay, so that is the reason why he doesn't feel the guilt. And finally, the virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is given by Aristotle, and basically it says that both deontological theory and teleological theory, or utilitarianism and universalism, focus on your behavior. They focus on your behavior. But Aristotle says that it's not enough that your behavior is good, but by virtue you should be good. Your thought process should also be good. So that is what virtue ethics is, right? Basically says that both the Kantian utilitarian system and Kantian system and Newton system provide guiding principle for the actions, right? But not for your thought process. So it's not enough that your actions are good. Your thought process behind it, your virtue behind it should also be good. So that is what virtue ethics is, but it's difficult to understand. You cannot judge what the other person thinks. You have to judge him or her based on the actions only. So it's very difficult to judge or label anybody as unethical based on their thought process. So that's why it doesn't find much of application. So this is the theories on ethics. Is there anything that you want to clarify?
So I wanted to understand what exactly do you mean by positive and negative rights?
Okay, positive right means I have the right to get food, right? That is a positive right. Negative rights means I have the right to ensure that nobody harms me. I don't want a particular person to do something. That is negative. I don't want that to happen. Okay. I don't want anybody to harm me. I don't want anybody to hit me. I have the right to defend myself. So that is the negative right. Basically preventing a negative action by another person.
Okay.
Okay, so that is what well, it's not exactly a the theoretical terminology. We don't have any terminology for it. I call it as negative rights. That's all.
Okay. And so is virtue ethics more related to a person's traits as opposed to the other theories which are more specific on behavior?
No, it's about the thought process. Okay, I'll give a simple example probably that would make you to understand. Say, after some time, 1 or 2 months, probably you all come to the hostel, and some of you have your vehicles. Even though we are not allowed to have vehicles in the campus, you are keeping your vehicles outside. So you have. Let us assume you have a vehicle, and another person and a friend of you comes and borrows, asks you for the key. He wants to go to the city and he wants your two-wheeler or car, whatever it is, right? He's your friend, and you are giving the key. So your action is ethical because as a friend, you have the moral obligation to help your friend. So you are doing it. So your action is ethical. But inside your heart, your mind, you scold him, or what is this person? He doesn't want to bring his own car or two-wheeler, though he can afford to, because he don't want to put it in, his vehicle under risk. And he want the car as and when he wants. What kind of person is he? Now, are you an ethical person by thinking like this? The question is, the answer is no. Why? If you directly tell him on face that what you do is wrong, you should bring your car or two-wheeler if you want to go to city very often, then you are a good friend, right? You are giving him the right feedback. You don't do that. Instead, you scold him inside and then, go and tell somebody that, see, this guy, so basically you complain about him to others, which is wrong. Right. So that is why, even if you don't complain, if you think like that, that itself is, is not a good virtue. That's what this theory says. Okay. Your actions are right. You did give the keys to him, but your thought process is different. Okay. So that is what virtue ethics is.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a question.
Please go ahead, Vishal.
Sir, so in on the lines of positive and the negative rights, as you talked about, where do the privileges fit in? Are those an extension of the positive rights?
No. Privileges are not part of the rights. What is the privilege that you are talking about? Let me make it clear before proceeding with the answer.
So, sir, because in the terms of rights, we are talking about individualistic rights. There might be group rights as well. For example, we talk about minorities, and some laws are passed in favor of those people to especially protect those rights in terms.
Listen. The rights talk only about individual rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
The group rights and all are artificial kind of, right? There is nothing called a group right. Group right is something which was propagated after communism evolved. Before that, of course, the individual rights never existed in a holistic process, but today that's what we are talking about. Mm-hmm. So with the moment I talk about rights theory, we are talking about individual rights.
Right. All right.
Okay, fine. Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this virtue ethics is different from the intention, like you said, that it is about the thought of a person.
Basically you should be a good person inside you. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You should be a good person. If you feel that a particular friend of you, what he does or she does is wrong, tell him or her on the face in a polite way, right? Then you would be a good friend. Just because you are giving the key to your friend as and when he asks for doesn't make you, your actions are good, but inside you are not a good friend. So that is unethical. That's what virtue ethics says. And Shivani Pujari is asking, at times utilitarianism, virtue ethics might be contradicting. Yes, it's not utilitarianism and virtue ethics. Even every theory may take you in a different direction. That is why we have something called an ethical dilemma. Okay. If all the theories are able to give the same answer, we won't have any ethical dilemma.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So where should I fit this statement by Socrates? You have to be good to your friend when he's good and harm your enemy when he's evil.
Correct.
So which theory should I apply here?
That is what virtue ethics is. Be good to your friend. When you say be good to your friend, he means not by actions but by virtue.
Okay.
Okay, you should
So,
be a
but
good
be
friend in your
good to your
heart.
friend when he is good.
Pardon?
Be good to your friend when he is good, and harm
Correct.
your enemy when he is evil.
Correct. So when your friend is good, you also be good, not just in your action, but by virtue. That is implied one.
Okay.
Okay, it is implied. By virtue, you should be a good friend when the other person is a good friend.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So the theories are contradicting each other, and that's why we have the whole problem of ethical dilemma. Okay. You face many ethical dilemmas. I don't want to get into ethical dilemma situations now. I'm sure you discussed about solving ethical dilemma in your business ethics class. Right. So let's move on. The next one is law. Many times people confuse ethics with law and they assume that both are synonyms. An action is right because it is legal. An action is wrong because it is illegal. Right? So that kind of assumption is wrong. Ethics is different from law. Law is something which is created by the legislative bodies or the rulers. It can be changed. What is ethical, what is unethical cannot be easily changed because the ethics are based on the application of the moral standards which cannot be changed. Really. Laws can be changed. Right? Laws, you have the statutes like Indian Penal Code, Companies Act, Factories Act. Then you have the regulations which are come out by the regulatory bodies. What is the difference between regulation and law? Anyone?
Sir, is it about the executive and the legislature?
Yes, the regulations are formed by the professional bodies. SEBI is a regulator, right? Our TRA, Telecom Regulatory Authority, is a regulator. They also come out with the rules and regulations. Those regulations need to be followed, right? It's not the regulations are lesser in terms of implementation compared to law. Regulations also need to be followed, but who forms the regulation? It is the professional body. If you look into SEBI, the board of SEBI, which formulates the law, is full of experts in financial markets. Right? On the other hand, law is created by the legislative bodies, elected representatives ideally, but it's generally the legislative bodies. And law cannot be changed just like that. Right? You need to follow the due process. On the other hand, the regulations can be changed by an executive order. That is a difference. So regulations are subordinate to law. Law is supreme, right? In fact, law is also subordinate to the constitution of the particular country. So first is the foundation is constitution, then law, and then regulations. So that is a hierarchy. So constitutional amendment is not very easy. It requires 2/3 majority in the parliament across most of the countries. There's only one country in the world which doesn't have a written constitution. Which country? Any guess?
America?
It's UK, not America.
Oh.
America has signed the Constituent Assembly was set up, and
I'm sorry, I confused between because every time we can compare America and UK with Indian Constitution. I'm sorry.
So UK doesn't have a constitution. It doesn't mean that they don't have a constitution. They don't have a written constitution in the sense that UK never had what we call as a constituent assembly which sit and prepared a constitution. UK, the constitution has evolved through traditions. So they do have a constitution. So, but it evolved through tradition. On the other hand, the other countries do have a constitution, a well-documented constitution which was created by a constituent assembly. India had a constituent assembly from 1947 to 1950, right, which prepared the constitution. Thanks to Ambedkar, we had a great constitution. America had a constitution. the famous constitution. And then very recently, Nepal had a constitution few years back. They had a constituent assembly and created a constitution. So constitution is the foundation, and then law, and then ethics. So and the law. So what is the definition of law? Law is a consistent set of universal rules that are widely published, accepted, and enforced. It also defines a requirement that one need to act or must not act in the given situation. So each and every word in the definition is very important, right? It is consistent. It's consistent means degree of firmness, right? There is no excuse at all unless there is an inbuilt provision for a loophole. Otherwise, there cannot be any adjustment that you can make with the law. And consistent set of universal rules. Universal rules mean it's applicable to all. It's applicable to all unless there is an exemption given specifically. For example, President of India cannot be prosecuted for his actions, for his legal actions during his tenure as a president. So there is an exemption explicitly mentioned. Other than that, there cannot be any exemption. Unless the law says that this person is exempted, it's applicable to all. It's universal. If somebody if somebody commits a crime or a murder, the punishment is the same. Whether the person is a rich person or a roadside vendor, it doesn't matter. Okay, so it is universal and it is published. It's available in written form. Okay, and it's accepted. Everybody should accept. How can everybody accept it? Well, not individually everybody would accept it, but it would be accepted by the elected representatives of the people. It implies it need to be passed by the legislation. That is the meaning of it is getting accepted, right? So if it is a state law, it need to be processed. It need to be approved by the state legislature. If it is a national law in Indian context, it need to be approved by the parliament. So if majority of the representatives of the parliament or the assembly accept it, it implies everybody has accepted. And it is enforced. There is a mechanism to enforce. The courts, right, is the mechanism to enforce it. And there may be other mechanisms to support the court. For example, the police force, which would help the court in maintaining law and order. The executive, right, which would help in implementing the legal systems. So this is the definition of law. And now the question is, what is the link between ethics and moral standards, or ethics and law? Okay, ethics and law, as I already mentioned, are very different, right? Yes, to a greater extent, ethics borrows a lot. Law borrows a lot from ethics, but law also has many other things. Few days back, I was watching a very old movie clip, movie from a Tamil movie. I'll describe a particular scene. There is a poor pujari, a priest, who does puja in a Shiva temple, Lord Shiva temple, and he's very penurious, very poor, and but he's a very honest man. And one day, Lord Shiva appears in front of him. And so he asked him, do you have any problem? And this person says, he explodes. He says that, I'm a very honest and ethical person, but I don't have enough money. I have a hand-to-mouth existence, right? I couldn't feed my children properly. I couldn't provide them proper education. This is despite the fact that I'm very ethical and honest. On the other hand, one of my neighbor, right, he's smuggling goods illegally from another country and selling it at a premium here, and he makes good money. Another person, prints fake currencies. He circulates the fake currency and he is also rich. They have a comfortable life. So I am your devotee. Why are you making me suffer? Why are you making me suffer? And these guys, those two guys don't worship you. And they live a comfortable life. Why an ethical person like me is made to suffer? No, then the Lord asks a question. He says, did I ask you not to print currency? Did I ever tell not to smuggle goods? You also do it. When did I say don't print currencies? Right? That is nothing to do with ethics. That is a system that mankind has created. I never created any boundaries, artificial boundaries, and define or categorize the lands into different countries. The whole world is created by me. Right? You may call in any name, Allah, Jesus, or Shiva. The whole world belongs to me. You created boundaries, artificial boundaries, and I never created money. You created something called money and currency, and you said only these people can print, other people cannot print. And you created the artificial boundaries and said that if you want to cross some product from one part to one country to another, you need to pay tax. I never did all these things. They are illegal, but you cannot term those unethical. That's a basic point. Okay, so that's a beautiful explanation in a way. I felt right. It is illegal, correct? Certainly, it's illegal, but is it ethical? God never created any boundaries. The God never restricted the movement of the people. It is the people who said, this is my boundary. Even if you China, for example, try to intrude into Indian territory because they want more land. It's an act of the man. It's nothing to do with ethics. So I'm not telling that do not follow law. Follow the law. We all have the obligation to follow the law. But my only point is that do not confuse ethics with law. Right? Ethics is different. In fact, there are many instances where, one example I gave, the movie clip, there are many instances where the law might clash with ethics. Let's say you're walking along you are a doctor, let us assume. You are walking along this time, you're not walking on the beach, you're walking along the Bangladesh border in West Bengal, right? Or in Tripura. And there are no fences separating Indian and Bangladeshi borders, right? And you are a doctor, you have a medical kit. Typically, the doctors carry a small medical kit all the time. So you are carrying a small medical kit, and you see an elderly person suffering on the other side of the border, right? And you have to do a first aid to so that you can ensure that he doesn't die. Now, what will you do? As per the law, you cannot go there because if you cross the border, right, without passport and visa, you are committing an illegal act. But if you don't cross the border, choosing to go by the law, you are committing an unethical act. As a doctor, you have the moral responsibility to protect the life of any human if you can. And here you can. You have the first aid medical kit. You can go there, help him, and then do the first aid and then take him to a hospital. Right? But if you do it, it's a problem. If you don't do it, it's unethical. So the law and ethics are very different. Just because something is ethical doesn't mean it needs to be legal, and just because something is legal doesn't mean that it needs to be ethical. So this difference you need to always keep in mind. Okay. Well, somebody is asking about Bhagavad Gita, Bible, and Quran. I'll tell you my opinion. It need not be universally accepted. See, these documents are created to bind human beings with ethical, bind the human beings to the ethical practices. Remember, the rule of law is a very, very recent phenomenon. Rule of law is a very recent phenomenon. Why do I say so? Because when did the rule of law come into picture? Do you understand the meaning of rule of law? Can anyone explain what is rule of law? Anyone explain rule of law, please?
So possibly it is that you constrain the powers of people so that no one can exercise any kind of arbitrary power. So basically, like monarchs, etc., could let's say if someone dissented, they could execute the person, or something like that. So to restrict centralization of power in absolutely in one person, laws were created.
Exactly. That's good. So it is basically no individual has any discretion to decide what is right, what is wrong, and give penalty. In those days, in the olden days, as she was rightly pointing out, the monarchs had whatever the monarch decide is the law. There is no written law. So the rule of law was pioneered by the English kings.
A.V. Dicey.
Yes.
A.V. Dicey.
I'm not getting
I'm
it.
sorry, sir. It is like A.V. Dicey with the concept of rule of law.
Right.
And he said that it's not just arbitrary, but every poor man, rich man, everyone are equal
Exactly.
in
Yes,
law.
yes.
And it's not that the something written we had whatever our rights are not doesn't flow from what is something written, but
Right.
whatever constitution is, it is because of the people.
Right. Yes, Kavya, that's right. So that is that they signed the document as she was rightly pointing out. The English monarch and the lords and the rich people signed an agreement, which was called a Magna Carta. 800 years ago, I think 4 5 years ago, they celebrated the 800th anniversary of signing Magna Carta. But even after signing the Magna Carta, basically, as Kavya was rightly pointing out, said that the king will not act based on his discretion, but as per the law, the written agreement between the lords and the monarch. So that is what the Magna Carta event was, and that's the first recorded instance where the king agreed to follow rule of law. But it was not exactly followed. It became a mainstream idea only after the medieval period. That is during 16th and 17th century only, rule of law became the basic guiding principle to rule any kingdom or any republic. So now today rule of law is accepted by everybody, right? So you have written documents, but before that, before the Magna Carta event, how did the society ensure that people are bound, by a set of rules and not under the discretionary powers of the monarch or any other ruler? So for that purpose, you may disagree with me. For that purpose, these documents are created. They basically say that this is how you need to live. This is what right, this is what wrong, this is how you need to live in order to bring in an order in the society and make the society to follow ethical norms. Unless you tell that this is what ethics is, people will do whatever they want. So, in my opinion, the holy books are created, by God or anybody to ensure ethical practices in the society. That is why,
Sir,
yeah.
sir,
Because
previous
in those days, the rule of law as a concept didn't exist. Yeah, go ahead.
yes, sir. So previously, the church and the state were not separate, sir. So from
Yes,
what I understood, the church
correct,
was used to legitimize the power of the monarch,
correct,
right?
correct.
So, would you not say that they were in cahoots with each other? So whatever the monarch did, the church would legitimize, and whatever the church did, the monarch would legitimize. So was it not something
Yes,
like that?
yes, that is true. See, here I was not talking about the governance system that prevailed at that point in time. My answer is to a direct, simple question: what about the holy books? Okay, so I'm not denying what you say. Absolutely right. You are absolutely right. The monarchs and the church, right? That is on the Europe. Almost all the states were theocratic states, right? And the religious leaders, even in India, the priest had a very high order in any kingdom. The kings would consult, we did in Hinduism, we didn't have a single authority, but authority was localized, but still with the priest. That is the system that provide all over the world, not just in Europe, but across the world. Even today, if you take Iran, for example, Iran is a theocratic country. So what happens in Iran? You have somebody called a supreme leader. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is the supreme leader, and he is not the government. He is not part of the government. Iran has a president, right? Iran has ministers who run the government. But what is the role of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei? He has the power to decide whether a particular law passed by the government or a particular action by the government is in line with the Islamic principles. And if he feels that it is not in line with the Islamic principle, he can veto the particular action. So he doesn't come out with the law, he doesn't run the government, but he is the supreme authority. So that is how most of the governments were theocratic, almost all the governments were theocratic governments. Right? The supreme power lied with so that is because the holy books, the churches, the mosques and the temples have the authority on these documents, right? On the other hand, the Sunni Islamic State, the caliphates had a different different way of governing. Let's not get into that. But most of the governments were theocratic, not just the European governments. The church, as he rightly pointed out, has enormous clout on the governments. Okay, in fact, that is the reason why Protestant Christianity was given birth. It was there. Martin Luther King of Germany created it, but it was accepted by the state for the first time in England. So why did English king accepted it? Because the Pope, Vatican didn't approve his marriage. After divorce and marriage, it was not accepted. So he said, I don't want your religion. I'll follow Protestant Christianity, and that's why Protestant Christianity became the main religion in England and then later in Britain. Okay, so is there anything that you want to clarify? So again, so this is two different perspectives we have seen already. So now the question is, if we want to apply, these are the theories on ethics, and we also now know the difference between law and ethics. Now, how to apply the ethics or ethical principles in business? If we are talking about individual humans, it's very clear. How do you need to follow ethical standards? It's very clear. You may have a dilemma, still things are relatively simple and straightforward. Okay, most of the time. But how to ensure that a company, a business entity, follows ethics? Because business entity is a collection or a group of people, and they work together, and they are not individuals. When they work for the company, they work for the company, or they work for a firm, whatever it is. It's a business entity. Let's call it as a business entity for the time being. So how to ensure that that business entity follows ethics? It's very difficult to make the business entity follow ethics because, for example, it's difficult to apply the ethical theory to a business entity. For example, if you take universalism, right? Can we say how to make the business entities to follow ethics based on universalism? It's very difficult. Universalism says that what would you expect others to do if they are in your position? Can we say the same thing to a business entity? What would they expect other business entities to do? There are vast differences, right? What do you do? What are your capabilities as a business entity are different from what others would do. So what exactly the business entity need to do if they want to follow? Basically, it cannot be applied to business entities. So you need to have different approach to ensure that the business entities follow ethics. Okay, so that is where the corporate governance and other things come into picture. So how to apply ethical theories in business? There are three ways. The theory of corporate moral excellence, ethics and stakeholder theory, which is based on stewardship theory, and ethics and corporate governance, right? So these are the three things. So we are going to see them one by one. First, quickly, we will see in another 5 minutes, we will see a theory of corporate moral excellence. And we are going to give tremendous importance to the last one, that is corporate governance, right? Corporate governance, in a way, is a mechanism to ensure, broadly speaking, a mechanism to ensure the business entities follow ethics, and that is why we gave the detailed understanding, or we recollected the basic points and ethics, as a foundation to this course. So there are three ways with which we can make our three theories. There are more theories, but I find these three very important. In fact, if you look into the textbook, any textbook, they will only talk about two. Okay, theory of corporate moral excellence is not something which can be easily observed and followed. And then ethics and stakeholder theory, which is generally known as stewardship theory, right? The application is stewardship theory, and then agency ethics and corporate governance. So what is theory of corporate moral excellence? I'm sorry, I think something went wrong. Okay. What is theory of corporate moral excellence? One second, give me a minute. Okay, theory of corporate moral excellence is that states that the corporations need to have two sets of values. One is espoused value and values in practice. What it says is that how to ensure that the corporations or business entities follow ethics. It basically states that the first step is to create a set of well-defined value system. Create a well-defined value system. So that is called espoused value, and then ensure that those values are, practiced in the business as well. That is values in practice. So basically ensure that there is no difference between espoused values and values in practice. If you are able to do that, then your company or your business entity is an ethical entity. So first, have a set of espoused values, that is well-defined value system for your company. Many companies nowadays do that. If you take Tata's, for example, Tata's have a well-defined set of values for them. Okay, and then they try to ensure that it is being practiced. If you take Murugappa Group, they have a well-defined set of 5 value principles, right? And they ensure that those 5 values are followed in whatever action that the employee is doing. So if they are able to 100% do it, then they are an ethical company. So this is one approach to ensure that the business entities remain ethical. First is to create a set of espoused values and ensure that it is being practiced. So that is the area of corporate moral excellence, right? And okay, so with this, is there anything that you want to clarify? Okay, if you don't have anything to clarify, then let me see if there is a chart. Okay, so if you don't have anything to clarify, then we'll take a break for 15 minutes. Do not log off. Okay, and anyhow, I'm not going to close the session. The Zoom session would continue, but I'll be back by, what is time now? 10:15 now. So I'll be back by 10:30. Okay, we'll continue at 10:30. Okay, welcome back. I hope all of you are back. Anyhow, we cannot wait for people to join, so we will start. Okay, so we talked about the theory of corporate moral excellence. So the next thing that we need to talk is about stewardship theory, right? The stewardship theory is the next one that we need to discuss. Okay. So stewardship theory basically says that how to ensure that the organization need to be ethical. Very simple. Give the control to the managers. Assume that managers are stewards. The managers will act as a responsible stewards of the assets they control. That is the assumption. So the stewardship theories assume that if there is a chance given to the managers, whoever is the person in charge of the business entity is called a manager. How to ensure that the organization follows ethical path? Basically, leave it to the judgment of the manager. The manager would act in a responsible manner as the steward of the assets under their control. Now, why do we need to leave it to the managers rather than prescribing anything? It is because the organization has multiple stakeholders, and any action in favor of one stakeholder might affect another stakeholder, with thereby creating ethical issues. Each and every issue is unique, and hence you cannot simply say this is the right path for the corporation or right path for the business entity. Leave it to the manager. Assume that the managers are stewards. Stewards are the one, the ship, the stewards, take the ship in the right direction. Similarly, the managers would take the ethical path for the business entity, balancing the diverging interests of various stakeholders. Because why the organization commits some unethical act? Because they try to favor one or another stakeholder. Remember the stakeholders that we have looked in the last session. The business entities have stakeholders, and the stakeholders have differing interests. So when an organization goes in an unethical path, when they try to favor one stakeholder over another. Why corporate frauds happen? The corporate frauds happen because the managers try to do something for themselves, and then or when a particular company business entity violate an environmental law, thereby harming the society, because they try to favor the shareholders or the profits. So when the unethical acts are committed by the organization, when they try to favor one stakeholder over another or others. So the best way to ensure that the organization or business entity is traveling in an ethical direction is to leave the decision making to the managers. Assume that the managers are good. Most of the time they are. Or you appoint a person who is a good steward and then leave it to them. Why? Because you have multiple stakeholders. I'm just reproducing the slide that we have seen in the previous class. You have the shareholders and investors, the employees, customers, suppliers and other business partners, local community, government and competitor. All are stakeholders of business entities. Each one of them have a different expectation, and there is a lot of conflict between their expectation. So the manager is the best person to balance the conflicting interest of various stakeholders, right? So what is the expectation of an employee? The employees would prefer the highest possible salary with the lowest possible, work burden. You may be able to provide that, but it will cost a lot for the shareholders. The profit would come down, or you may have to charge a higher price from the customers, or you may have to evade tax from the paying to the government, and so on. Or you may have to ignore the safety environmental norms, which would affect the local community. So employees would want everything for themselves, but that would create problems for other stakeholders. Or if you take the shareholders would want the maximum profit. That might cause lower salary to the employees and high price to the customers, or again tax evasion to the government, and so on, or very low profit share to the suppliers and business partners. And same is the case with the customer, right? The customers would want the best possible product at the lowest possible price. That may lead to exploitation of the labor. That may lead to cheating the consumers or cheating the government. That may lead to ignoring the safety norms. All those problems would come in. So the interests of various stakeholders are in conflict with each other. And when you try to satisfy one stakeholder's interest over others, that becomes an ethical act. So who is the best person to manage all these things? The manager, the stewards. Assume that the managers are stewards, because they know what is right for each of the stakeholders. Nobody else can decide that, right? The employees would always prefer something for themselves rather than worrying about shareholders. And same is the case with the shareholder, a customer, business partner, etc. So the manager is the only person who understands the expectations of all the stakeholders, and he would be able to balance it. So if you want an organization to be an ethical organization, appoint a manager who can be the steward of the organization, and then leave the decision making to him. Because there is no prescribed solution to ensure, according to this theory, there is no prescribed solution to ensure that this is the way to make an organization. It's very simple. Assume the manager to be the steward. That's all. In fact, if you look deep into it, you will understand even that is not very easy. Forget about conflict between various stakeholders. Even when you consider only one stakeholder, you will have a hell of a lot of problems, ethical dilemmas. We'll see one by one briefly. You would have discussed it in the business ethics course as well. What is the responsibility of business entities towards employees?
So to provide them a safe working environment, provide them equal opportunities for growth and promotion, to supply them the remuneration for their work on time and with due diligence.
Okay, so we'll put it in a structured manner. First is providing safe work environment. What is providing safe work environment? You can have a dilemma, right? Providing safe work environment means what? You can have a dilemma. Recruit in a fair and right manner. What is a fair and right manner? That leads to a lot of other questions. Is reservation okay? Is it an ethical way of ensuring right recruitment? It's debatable. One section of the society would say, yeah, reservation is required. Another section of the society would say, no, reservation is penalizing the capable person. It can always be debated. Another recruitment, again, if you're releasing advertisement in a newspaper, is it fine? Sometime back, few years back, the public sector companies were not allowed to come and recruit from the elite institutions like IIMs and IITs. You know why? They were banned from doing it. You know why? Why PSUs now come to IIMs for campus recruitment, but 5-6 years ago, they were not permitted.
Yeah, so equal opportunity part, like they were
Equal
preferring.
opportunity. That's right, absolutely. right? You know, why are you giving opportunity only to IIMs and IIT graduates? That's the question. You release an advertisement and then let everybody apply. The problem is that, you know, when I was interacting with the ONGC HR manager, 7-8 years back, he said the moment we say we need graduate training engineers, we get a lakh applications, more than lakh application. No, how do we process it? Right? We would be spending our time in processing 1 lakh application, which is absurd, which doesn't make any sense. Right? Even if we conduct an exam, written exam to shortlist, how to conduct a written exam for 1 lakh applicants? Even the educational institutions, you know how difficult it is for IIMs to conduct CAT exam. In fact, IIMs are educational institutions. We know how to conduct exam. Even for us, it's a challenging task. And here we are talking about a oil exploration company called ONGC. And if you expect them to conduct, written tests, they don't have any clue about how to conduct written tests. So they would be wasting their energy in learning about it. So we are deviating as ONGC. We are deviating from our core job, by putting our energy to create a right and meaningful written test, and then spend our energy and time on shortlisting people and conducting interviews for maybe the vacancies are 100. We have to conduct around 20,000 candidate interviews for 20,000 candidates, which is absolutely a waste of time. Instead, if we spend that money on creating a new oil exploration asset, that would be more helpful. So that's a point. So on one side, equal opportunity is required. On the other side, if they give opportunity to everyone, it creates a chaos. Then, so every aspect you have problem. Hiring policies, then remuneration, on what basis you fix the remuneration, and what basis you give the promotion, on what basis you give the promotion in an ethical manner. That's again debatable. Is it based on seniority? Is it based on capability? Is it based on educational qualification? On what basis you give promotion? What is the ethical basis to give promotion? Anybody?
So currently it is given based on seniority and capabilities.
Where? Seniority and capability.
So government of India based on seniority.
No, we are not talking about government of India. We are in general talking about business entities.
So it should be given according to efficiency and the work they have put on.
You know what? In Reliance Industries, right? The most influential person, apart from the shareholders and the Ambani family, the persons who lead any new initiative are Anand Jain and Manoj Modi. Okay, what is their qualification? What is their capability? A question was once asked to Mr. Ambani, why is that only these two people are leading all your ventures? Are they the most capable persons? He said, no, but they may not be the most capable person, but I can trust them any day. The loyalty, the promotion or the opportunities were given based on loyalty. What he implied was, I may not be able to trust my own brother. I can always trust Manoj Modi or Anand Jain. So the loyalty becomes very important. Can we say Mr. Mukesh Ambani is unethical? Certainly no. So there, the criteria for elevation and promotion and new opportunities is based on loyalty than anything else. You can say, I can blindly trust Manoj Modi. Certainly he is not unethical, right? So on the other hand, if you think, if you give the promotion based on loyalty, there will be a set of people who feel that this is unethical.
Sir?
Yes?
Sir,
go ahead, Sriram.
Sir, in case of a private entity, is it not that person's prerogative to give promotion on whatever factors that person wants to?
Are we talking about a private entity? We are talking about a
business
publicly listed company where you have other shareholders, where you have employees, right? Where you have other employees. So that is.
But would the market not nullify all these effects? Say, for example, the promotion is done based on a particular factor. So the market sentiment would itself reflect that, right? So
No. We are not talking about market sentiment. I'm just asking whether it is ethical to give promotion based on loyalty.
sir, I think that is subjective, sir. So suppose I start an entity.
Exactly, sir. That's exactly my point. It is subjective, and hence the manager is the right person to decide. That's exactly what I want to say. There is no well-defined path to give a promotion. There will always be murmurs about it, right? There will always be murmurs. If you take Infosys, for example, Infosys in the late 2000s lost some well-qualified people at the very top because they realized that, for example, I forget the name of the HR head, a lady. She was doing exemplarily very well in Infosys in late 2000s, 2007. But at some point she resigned. Why did she resign? Because she knew that there is no way to get promoted beyond that. She is the head of HR at Infosys. She set exemplary HR policies for HR, right? Amazing culture was created thanks to her effort. But she resigned. Why did she resign? Because she hit a glass wall. She cannot become a member of the board of Infosys because already the board of Infosys was crowded with the founders. The 5 founders are already in the board, right? There is no room for probably more than 1 or 2 outside, the executives, right? Executive outside the founders list. So she knew, I think Hema Ravichandran was the person, she knew that it's not going to work. So she quit because they're not going to promote her to board position, despite she having the capability. Why? Because the founders are there.
So then based on what you said, won't these reactionary measures even serve as a feedback for them to change their policy itself?
They didn't change. Why should they?
Because they would get the best. They would take the company the best possible way, right?
That is the assumption that we are making. We always want the best. Doesn't matter, right? Do you think Manoj Modi is the most capable person in Reliance Industries? Certainly no, which Mr. Ambani himself acknowledged. So if you put some more, another person who is much more qualified than Mr. Manoj Modi in the position, maybe things could have done better. But Ambani wanted somebody whom he can trust at any point in time. He implied that he can't even trust. So the point here is that what is ethical, what is unethical cannot be clearly outlined. Hence, the best part. So similarly, workplace environment. Somebody talked about workplace environment. Provide safe workplace environment is what Vaibhav said, I guess. Now, what is, you would have heard about what we call as Alanport. Alanport in Gujarat is known for shipbreaking. Now, what happened to the shipbreaking industry in Alanport? It is dying. Now, why it is dying? Because the NGOs, human rights organizations, started insisting that the shipbreaking companies provide safety measures, safety equipment for the employees. Because when you're breaking the ships, right? When you're breaking the ships, you are breaking basically the decommissioned ships. The decommissioned ships have a lot of hazardous materials and chemicals like ash potash. So when you break them, the ash potash particle, for example, gets into the lungs of the people who are working on it, and it affects their health. So they said you need to provide safety masks, right? And safety mask not just means the mask that we use to protect us from COVID. You need to have a proper mask. Each one of them would cost 300, 400 rupees, and you need to replace it, change it very often. So if you incur, and remember you have thousands of people working on it. So if you start providing all these things, the cost of operations will go up. If the cost of operations are going up, the company would not be able to bid for the decommissioned ship. You get what I say? Now, since the NGOs started insisting on safety equipments to the laborers involved in shipbreaking, the cost went up, and the shipping companies started losing. Sorry, the shipbreaking companies started losing the bids for taking the decommissioned ship. because their overall cost goes up. So they have to bid for amount which is higher than the cost. On the other hand, a shipbreaking company from say Bangladesh would be able to bid for a lower cost because bid for a cost which is lower than these people, and they would get it, right? So why? Because they don't need to follow any safety norms. So now what happened at Allen Port? The employees who were earlier working with the shipbreaking companies are now suffering. They are doing some menial jobs, right, which gives them very little money. Earlier they were getting around 200, 300 rupees per day. Now they are getting around 100 rupees. They have become more penurious. So now the question is, why did this happen? Because the companies insisted that you give them safe work environment. Right? And many of them have committed suicide because they couldn't get another job. So the question is between providing them a job or making them to die. Which is better? Which is ethical? Provide them a job which is hazardous and harmful, but still it gives them something to eat and have a decent life. Or insist on safety environment, safe work environment, and make them commit suicide. So what is ethical? So all those things get into picture. When you talk, this is just one. We are just talking about one set of stakeholder. Even within this, you don't know what is right, what is wrong. Retrenchment, is it right? It's a problem. If you don't fire employees, then your company may sink. BSNL, for example, right, gave VRS to almost half of the workforce. Now the problem is, what will they do at that stage, right? A person who is at the age of 50, of course, BSNL did give a very, very handsome VRS package. Still, at the age of 50, if we are forced to take VRS, even though it's VRS, it's almost enforced on them. What will you do? You still have another 15 years of active life left in you. You can't find another job, right? So you can't find another job. What will you do? But if you look into that perspective, the company would sink. The entire company would sink. In Airtel, the employee expenses is just 8% of the total expenses. In BSNL, the employee expenses is 80% of the total expenses prior to the VRS. 80% of the total expenses. That's why BSNL was unable to expand their operation, because most of their expense goes towards salary and pension benefits to the employees and ex-employees. So they lost them. So if you don't retrench these people, BSNL as an entity would sink. So what is better? Firing we are forcing a person to take a VRS, or allowing the company to sink, which is better? So all these things would come, they all pose ethical dilemmas. And what is the ethical responsibility towards customers? Anyone? You can even type. In my laptop, the chat window is open, so I can always see that. Fair pricing. Okay. Safety of the product. Okay. True information. Worth the money. All these points are right, but what we forget is that they are all interlinked to each other, right? The basic thing is to provide right price, right product at the right price, with the right promotion at the right place. I'm going with a famous classic 4 piece of marketing. Right product at the right price, through right promotion at the right place. Of course, it also includes providing after-sales service, etc. Right? So now, what is the right price? That's debatable. What is the right product? That's again debatable. For example, the infant milk is tobacco. Let's take a very simple and popular example. Is tobacco right product? Is it an ethical product? Tobacco, cigarette. Now, can you say the ITC is an unethical company because they are selling tobacco?
So we cannot comment on the product itself, whether it's
no. That's
ethical or
exactly what I'm
unethical.
telling. That's exactly what I'm telling. It's very difficult to say what is the right product. If you are permitting tobacco, why not permit marijuana? Cannabis. In what way? At least cannabis has some medical benefits as well. Tobacco doesn't have anything.
But all of these growing tobacco also leads to employment opportunities. So there's a positive side to that as well.
So
And there's
growing
a
marijuana would not lead to employment
yeah,
opportunities.
it would definitely. That is why all countries are going for it, like USA or many states in USA and Canada also. So
Okay. So, but tobacco also kills people.
yes,
Right?
so like I said, there's pros and cons to both the things. You cannot comment.
Exactly. So, what is the right product is always debatable. Let me take different example. Take for example, infant milk powders. Is it an ethical product?
What was the product, sir?
Infant milk powders. Infant milk powders. See, mother's milk is the best. In fact, is the most important thing for any infant. Right? The immunity develops only when the mother feeds it. Otherwise, if you are encouraging the infant to take milk based on infant milk powder, it would seriously harm the immunity of the child in its future. But the companies are selling infant milk powder just like that. Right? They would say in a small words in the packet, they would say mother's milk is the best. Now, is it an ethical product? Yes, some mothers may be having some issues, some health issues, they may not be able to feed. And for them, the doctors can always prescribe. You can make infant milk powder as a H drug. H drug is a drug which can be sold only on doctor's prescription. So for them, you can make it as a H drug. You are making it as a OTC product, over-the-counter product. Anybody can go and buy the product, and many mothers may not even know that it's actually harmful for their own children. So why can't ban infant milk powder and make it available only as a H drug? We are not doing it. So is it an ethical product? It's questionable. Plastics, they are harmful, right? Is it an ethical product? In many ways. For example, the straws that we use, plastic straws, are the most harmful things, right? So you can always debate about what is ethical product, what is right price. The dynamic pricing itself can be questioned. Nowadays we don't have airlines flying in the same frequency, but in the olden days, not olden days, it's just 6-7 months ago, if you are buying a flight ticket 3 months before your travel, you would get it at the cheapest possible price. And if you are buying it 3 hours before the travel, you would get the highest possible price, right? Now the question is, the person who is paying the lowest possible price, when you buy 3 months before the travel, you can get it at the lowest possible price. Who buys it 3 months before the travel? Somebody who plans a luxury trip or a tour, holiday tour, right? Only they can plan it 3 months in advance, and they are paying the lowest possible price. And who would plan it just 3 hours before the travel? Probably somebody who has some medical emergency in some other place, and you are charging them the highest. Is it not a person who is going on a holiday trip is paying the lowest price, and a person who is traveling for medical reason is paying the highest price? So is dynamic pricing a right approach, right pricing method? Is it ethical? It's debatable. I'm not telling that it is unethical. I'm just telling this is debatable. Right? So We can't decide what is right, what is wrong, what is ethical, what is unethical. We even within a particular segment of stakeholder, forget about conflict between stakeholders. You get what I say? Forget about conflict between stakeholders. Even within each of the stakeholder segment, we don't know what is right, what is ethical, what is unethical. That's why we need to make that's why stewardship theory says that give the freedom to the manager. Let the manager decide. Let the manager decide what is right.
Sir, but when we talk about the airline example, like another counter argument to it would be that a business professional, a big CEO or a big executive of a company who travels to meetings on short notice, on a week or a couple of days notice, can pay more, whereas a family which is planning a trip, or a student like me who knows that okay, I have holidays coming up in December and I can buy tickets to go back home from Kozhikode. Since I have a plan, I can choose to pay a lower price because a middle class person or person who's not earning much plans their holidays. They don't take impromptu holidays. So that could also be an argument.
That's true. That's exactly the point that I'm making. It is not possible to decide, right? Is it possible to ask every customer that why are you making this booking, right? Is it a genuine? Is it a thing like educational travel, or is it like a holiday travel? And if you say holiday travel, I'll charge you more, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. It's not possible. A person, I know there are instances where I paid more, as an individual. I belong to middle class. I paid more because there is some medical emergency at home. So is it right? And I paid an hefty amount, which otherwise I cannot afford, right? Dipping into my savings, and then is it right? I can always comply. I can always say it's unethical. Right. Similarly, the non-refundable tickets, even though they say non-refundable tickets, why do you say that it's a non-refundable ticket? If I'm canceling it, say 4 hours before, why can't you give try railways, for example? They don't have anything called non-refundable ticket unless it is tatkal. Right? They don't have any ticket you can cancel. Why not the airlines not following it? It is my money. I am buying the ticket, right? You may have a penalty when you are refunding it. Why do you have something called non-refundable ticket? Is it a fair pricing method?
But sir, if they don't put a penalty on that, then travel agents will book the whole flight and then sell the tickets at a higher price, and then whatever tickets they cannot sell, they'll cancel without any penalty.
No. You are talking about having an intermediary, right? You can always directly book, and there are non-refundable tickets, right? And why should there be a concept of non-refundable ticket by the airlines?
Because if because if there are no non-refundable tickets, people can cancel their flights at the last moment, and the flights will land up with empty seats that they cannot sell.
You can always say that you need to cancel it at least 2 days in advance. I am booking, say, an international ticket, travel ticket, and then most of the international tickets are non-refundable, and then I cancel it 1 month before the travel, and still it's non-refundable.
And also, sir, they're giving an opportunity to insurance companies. If you provide some certain insurance, that is also another.
Okay, so the point here is that there are two sides to anything. What is right pricing is always debatable. Just one point we are able to generate so much of discussion. So what is right, what is ethical is always debatable. That's exactly my point. And similar is the case with the business partners. The most important responsibility to a business partner is trust, nothing else. Trust. Create a trust, work towards creating a trust. And once the trust is broken, then they break up. So the responsibility, so who has the responsibility to create the trust? And what is the trust? How to maintain the trust? There is no single way to define it. And similarly, the investors, you have ethical issues with respect to investors, is financial issues and disclosure. To what extent you need to disclose? If you disclose everything about your company, then the competitors would get the information. If you don't disclose anything, the shareholders would have a problem. What should be the right remuneration to the top management, which would affect ultimately the profit? And the strategic moves, mergers and acquisitions. These are all ethical issues with respect to investors. An ethical issue with respect to the government is obey the law in letter and spirit and pay taxes. Okay, so here again, how do you calculate the tax? You have plenty of loopholes in calculating the tax that the company need to pay. So can you utilize all those things? That is called tax avoidance, which is perfectly legal. But is it ethical? Right? Tax avoidance is perfectly legal. Is it ethical? That's a question. It's a dilemma. So the point is that, and responsibility towards competitor. What are the responsibilities that you have towards competitors? Fair business practices. What are the issues here?
So one issue might be we're letting go of a competitive advantage by focusing more on being fair. There's a decision that has to be taken whether to focus more on profits or to be more inclusive and promote employees' welfare.
Okay. See,
The misuse of dominance.
Dominance is it? See, Microsoft, for example, is dominating the computer operating system market as well as Office product market. So you say they are unethical. Windows operating system is the kind of monopoly operating system. In almost 85% of the computers in the world have a Windows operating system. Then comes Mac operating system, Apple's operating system, Chrome, and then you have Ubuntu or Linux-based operating systems, right? So can we say that obviously they are exploiting, Microsoft is exploiting their monopoly? It's a cash cow for them. Microsoft today is able to experiment with new things because the operating system is a cash cow. Now, are they right in making themselves as a monopoly, thereby depriving the competitor to have a level playing field? That's debatable, right? What is ethical responsibility towards competitors is debatable. Poaching, for example, is poaching ethical? What is poaching?
So taking the top executives from other companies and bringing them into your.
Yeah, you approach them, not necessarily top executives. You approach them, convince the competitors' employees to join you. If they apply on their own, that's a different issue. So that is poaching. Is poaching unethical? That's debatable. Why it is debatable? Because when private insurance companies were allowed to come in, life insurance companies were allowed to come in, they poached the executives from LIC. Now, is it ethical? There is no other way. Why? Because the senior management level, you need experienced people in life insurance industry, and LIC was the only company which was operating in life insurance sector till that point in time. So where will you get the experienced senior management personnel? Only from LIC. So you poach them. If you don't poach them, your company cannot come up. So it is always debatable whether poaching is right or wrong. Every issue is debate. Poaching and predatory pricing. Geo came into the market and said everything is free, and then even when they started charging, it was rock bottom price. And that resulted in many competitors going out of the business. It's his own brother's company, Reliance Communication went out of business. A whole lot of companies went out of business. Aircel went out of business. Many companies went out of business. So can we say Geo is unethical? Reliance Geo, because they followed predatory pricing. Right? Are they unethical towards their competitors?
Sir, it can also be argued that the other competitors like Airtel and Vodafone, they were not offering fair prices before Jio came. So were they ethical? So you can also think on those lines as well.
So that's the point. So you can always debate on both sides, right? You can always debate on both sides. So the point here is that there is nothing clear about what is the responsibility towards, what is the ethical responsibility towards business partners, sorry, the competitor. So like this, we can keep on going like that. And the ultimate point is that even within a stakeholder segment, what is ethical is not well defined. So if this, and you also have conflict of interest between various stakeholders, you know, the consumers and business partners and employees and the shareholders, all of them have their own. So how to balance it? Only the manager can balance. So leave it to the discretion of the manager. If you want your company to be ethical, leave the decision making to the manager. The manager has to be the steward, and he would take it, because each and every situation demands a unique solution, and the manager is the best placed person to take a decision. So, you know, appoint the right person, steward, as the manager, and forget about it. So that is the way to ensure that the corporations are run, our business entities are run in an ethical manner. So that is the second theory. So we talked about theory of corporate moral excellence and then stewardship theory. Okay. So is there anything that you want to clarify on stewardship theory?
Sir, in the stewardship theory, does it imply that the managers will follow something like a satisficing behavior?
I'm not getting your question, please.
Sir, does the stewardship theory imply that managers will follow satisficing behavior? So that, because since different stakeholders have divergent interests, so, you know, basically kind of maximize satisfaction for all, you know, provide a minimum level of satisfaction for all of them.
Correct. The utilitarianism, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's good. That's a good point that you brought in. You know, utilitarianism would be the objective of the managers. But you can also say that some managers may choose to follow universalism as well, you know, not to the action. They may give importance to the actions also. That depends on the individuals.
Okay.
But it's better left to the managers. Managers are the stewards. They would do the good thing to the company. You only need to appoint the right person, a good person, and then leave it. Don't interfere. You don't need to worry about organization going in an unethical path, as long as you are appointing the right person. So that is stewardship theory. Then comes ethics and corporate governance. So before talking about corporate governance, before even defining corporate governance, you need to keep one point in mind. Corporate governance is something specific to the companies, right? You talk about corporate governance predominantly focusing on the companies, joint stock companies, the registered joint stock companies. So the question is, when did the first company form? Okay, so that is what we are trying to understand, the history of corporate firm. What do you think is the first company of the world?
Dutch East India Company.
East India Company would be the most popular answer, but that's not the first company. In fact, why did they started thinking about a company itself is an interesting thing, because before 15th century, all the business entities were small, right? Their structure would be either proprietorship or partnership, and they are small. And so that is how the business entities were doing business. Most of them are trading firms. Even the limited manufacturing firms, they would be either proprietorship or partnership. There is nothing called companies. And so that is on one side. The other side, the international trade in those days, 15th century, was happening through two routes predominantly. One is the Silk Route, which China is now trying to revive, which is a land route, and the Spice Route, which is the Indian Ocean route. Okay, so this is the look into the map. The orange route indicates the Silk Route, And the blue lines indicate, the orange lines indicate the Silk Route, and the blue lines indicate the Indian Ocean trade route or spice route. Okay. Now, now we know what is an epidemic or what is a pandemic, but Corona is luckily is not a lethal disease all the time. The death rate is around 2%, 2 to 3%, which is okay, which is manageable. But in the 13th century, the bubonic plague spread in Europe. Bubonic plague spread in Europe, and it wiped out 1/3 of the population across Europe. 1/3 of the population died because of the plague. Now, when they tried to find where did the plague come from, can you make a guess? It's no different in those days as well.
China.
Plague actually came from China. So, and it traveled through the Silk Route. So the Europeans got fed up with that and said, let's not do any traveling, trading through the Silk Route. And Silk Route was already on the verge of collapse. Why it was already on the verge of collapse? Because after Genghis Khan and his direct descendants, the great Chinese empire, the Mongolian descendants, that empire collapsed. It means there were multiple small kingdoms that evolved with sovereignty across the Silk Route. Earlier, the entire Silk Route was under the control of the Chinese empire. Okay, and so they can ensure uniform laws and regulations and trade policies throughout the route. But after the collapse of the Mongolian or Sino-Mongolian empire, Genghis Khan and its descendants, the trade route had multiple kingdoms along its path. Each kingdom, declared its sovereignty, and they started having their own rules and regulations, which created a lot of problems for the traders traveling in the Silk Route. So already there are a lot of problems for the Silk Route. It was on the verge of collapse. The traders were trying to avoid Silk Route as much as possible because there is no uniform authority which can govern the rules and regulations, and there are also problems of pirates and thieves. They were already on the way. It was already on the verge of collapse, and the bubonic plague sealed the Silk Route collapse once forever, and it has not revived as yet. China is trying to revive it. So that route was closed. On the other side, the spice route was also facing the problem in the 14th century. Why the spice route was facing the problem? It is because of the emergence of Ottoman Empire, right? Ottoman Empire at its peak covered this portion, whatever you see in yellow, at its peak covered it. What it essentially means is that the Ottoman Muslim, within some Islamic empire, the Muslims of Middle East were not in good terms with the Christians of Europe because of the crusades in the previous centuries. That is in the 11th and 12th centuries. There are a lot of crusades. The Christian Europeans attacked the Islamic Middle East to retrieve the Holy Land. And so that created a bad blood between the Middle East Muslims and Christian Europeans. So, and they did allow the trade to happen through their route because they didn't have a choice. But Ottoman Empire became very powerful. They, got Constantinople, and which was the seat of Eastern Roman Empire's power. So they started dominating. So the Europeans were uncomfortable to conduct trade through, they were not permitted to conduct trade through Ottoman Empire. Even if the trade is permitted, it was on the terms set by the Muslims, which they didn't like it. There is another way, that is to conduct trade through Italians. Italians were able to manage, but Italians become very greedy. In the 15th century, the financial capital of the world was Italy. Italy was not a single kingdom at that point in time, but the financial centers of the world were all in Italy. Florence, Venice, right? Milan. They were all the financial capitals of the world, and they were very greedy as well. The trade was happening through them. And in fact, when Shakespeare wrote about a greedy merchant. What was the title of the book?
The Merchant of Venice.
Merchant of Venice. Why did he title it as Merchant of Venice instead of, he lived in London? Why did he title it as Merchant of London? Didn't he title it as Merchant of London? Why did he say Merchant of Venice? Because the Venice traders, the Italian traders, were known to be greedy. And hence the rest of the Europeans wanted to avoid it. Well, it's not predominantly Italian reason, but the Ottoman Empire was the main reason. And they wanted to, so Ottomans closed the spice route as well. So already the trade route, the Silk route was closed. Now the spice route is closed. Yes. Okay. So these Europeans were very desperate to conduct trade with India. When I say India, it's not exactly the India, the physical, geographical, political entity that we live in, right? Anything east of India is India for them, right? So they were desperate to conduct trade with India for the spices. The spices have plenty of medicinal property, and they cannot be cultivated in Europe given the climatic conditions. It cannot be cultivated in Europe, but they have plenty of medicinal property. So they were kind of, particularly the aristocrats of Europe, were desperate to conduct trade with India for spices. So the Pope, as somebody was pointing out that the Pope had a lot of influence on the states. So the Pope of Vatican was a separate, it was called a papal state. Vatican was a separate country. Vatican and, you know, that part of, not just the city of Vatican, but Rome and other parts of, surrounding parts of Rome were all part of papal state. And the Pope had enormous influence on the other countries as well. So since the Europeans were finding it difficult to conduct trade through Ottomans, they decided to find another alternative trade route. So the Pope directed the Iberian kings. Pope directed the Iberian kings to find a new sea trade route to conduct trade with India. Iberia consists of Portugal and Spain. So the Pope told the Portuguese to travel east of Europe in the sea and find a new trade route. And the Spanish people, or Spanish king, was given the mandate to travel west of Europe and find a new sea trade route to India. They don't know how to go. So Portuguese people, you go in the eastern direction, and Spanish people, you go in the western direction. And we know the history. The Spanish people traveled west of Europe and ended up discovering Americas. And the Portuguese people traveled east of Europe, and one of them, Vasco da Gama, found the new sea trade route to India. Okay, so that is how, so they travel, Vasco da Gama traveled all the way covering Africa, and then finally landed right here at the place where I am sitting in, that's in Calicut. So he landed in Kapad Beach, you know, near 10 kilometers from this place. 20 kilometers from this way, and then he went to Goa, and then he went back. So new sea trade route was discovered. Now the problem is they could not start conducting trade because you need to do a big detour. Earlier, the travel was conducted in phases, right? Somebody from Mussoorie, which is somewhere near Kochi today, we don't know where it is, would not go all the way to, so Mussoorie is here, I'm sure you can see the arrow. This is near Kochi, would not go all the way to Rome to conduct trade. He would go to probably some place in Muscat, sell whatever his product to the trader in Muscat, and the trader in Muscat probably would go to Musa, and he will sell the product to the trader in Musa. And Musa trader would go to Alexandria, and Alexandria trader would go to Athens, and so on. So the trade in those days were happening in phases. A trader from Rome would not come all the way to Mussoorie and our reverse, right? So they don't need to have huge ships and big ships and all. They would have small ships, you know, even today in Bayport, the shipbuilding is happening. Okay, those ships are, you know, they are building the ships for a long time. But now you need to travel all the way from Portugal to Calicut on your own. And the sub-Saharan Africa, it is always known as a dark continent. They were not well versed with the trade, unlike the Arabs, right? The Europeans could directly conduct trade via Arabs because Arabs are well versed in trade, but the sub-Saharan Africans were not well versed in trade, so you cannot conduct trade through them. You cannot find a trader in, say, Natal and then sell it to him and he would go. That's not going to work. So you need to travel if you are selling something. You need to travel all the way from Portugal to Calicut, covering the Cape of Good Hope on your own. So that is going to be a tedious thing. You need to have huge ships. So your trading company need to invest a lot of money. Partnership firms and single sole proprietorship firms would not be able to raise so much money. Okay, so they had a dilemma. A new sea trade route has been found, but they don't know what to do with that because you need huge ships to travel via the newly discovered route, and huge ship means a lot of investment. No single trader or group of traders have that much money. So sole proprietorship firm and partnership firm structures were not going to work. Okay, so the Europeans were, so the sea trade route was found in 1498, I guess, right? That's the end of 15th century, and they don't know what to do afterwards, right? There is a sea trade route that is found. Vasco da Gama found a new trade route to India bypassing the Ottomans. What to do afterwards? You need a huge ship. You don't have money. No single individual or partners have that much money to build a huge ship which can stay in the waters for 3-4 months at a go, right? And so which means you need to have enough food and water, everything. So how to build such a huge ship? And you cannot keep rest of the ship empty. So you need to buy so much of product to be traded. How would you buy all those products at one go? That's also very difficult. So we will stop our discussion here. What did they do? We will stop our discussion here and wind up the session. Before that, if you have any questions to ask, please ask me.
You said that Dutch East India Company was not the first corporation. Then can you please tell which one?
Pardon? Dutch East India Company?
Was not the first corporation.
No. That's not the first.
Can you tell which one?
Pardon?
Can you tell which one? Which were the first?
We will talk about it tomorrow. Don't worry.
Okay.
In the next class. Don't worry. I appreciate your enthusiasm. We'll talk about it. Any other questions? Okay. I'm sure you are aware of the rules of class participation. I'm again reiterating. I calculate class participation based on your chat window discussions as well as discussions through the voice and video mode. Okay, so both would be taken into account. Obviously, your voice and video mode responses through voice and video mode would have more weightage than the chat window responses. Okay, so that is going to carry more weightage, basically to encourage that more people are participating through the voice and video mode. Still, if you are unable to get an opportunity, then you can chat through chat window, but that weightage is certainly less. So keep that in mind and try to participate in the discussions. And secondly, once this class gets over, I will make all the reading material available at one go. You can download it at any point in time and take printouts if you want and keep it in the printer, or you can use it in the soft copy form as well. Okay, fine. So with this, we will wind up this class. We will meet again on next Monday, coming Monday at 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.